Hello everyone, this is Nilesh here once again. In the last session, we talked about the C Sharp classes and objects. We discussed that class is a user-defined data type and we can combine different fields and methods in the class. And from that class, we can create the multiple objects. We talked about different types of methods that can be given, that can be written inside the class, like constructor, destructor, traditional getter setter, or the smart getter setter called as properties. We also seen that we can do the initialization by using the object initializer. Now that we are ready with the foundation, class and object, it's time to go ahead and discuss the better code organization. And that is nothing but the topic called as a namespace. Again, if you have the prior background of C++ or Java, you can compare this particular topic with the C++ namespaces or Java's packages. However, there are certain differences. The very first thing I'm talking about is namespaces are logical container. When I mean by the logical container, I want to say that the namespace doesn't create a separate file or separate folder. It is only the logical container which is understood by the C# compiler. And the primary purpose of the namespace is to do the better code organization. So you can arrange the code across multiple namespaces, and most importantly, your namespaces can be in the hierarchical manner, meaning by you can have a top level namespace, and inside that you can have nested namespace, and then you can have the further nesting of the namespace. This hierarchical arrangement helps you to arrange your code in a proper manner. I'll give you one example of predefined namespace. Here you see that there is System.Data namespace. The system is predefined top level namespace. You might have seen that earlier we use the System.Console. The system namespace had console class. On the similar way, over here, I'm talking about the System.Data namespace, where system is a top level namespace and data is nested inside this. This particular namespace is all about database connectivity. However, this namespace is having the further nested namespaces, like we have System.Data.SQL client for the classes which are helpful to connect to the SQL server, or System.Data.ODBC namespace, which is helpful for connecting to the ODBC data sources, which are bit legacy databases like Excel or Access you can connect. Apart from that, we also have like System.Data.OLEDB. This is for connecting with all other RDBMSs. And of course, as we will learn the database connectivity, something referred as a ADO.NET topic, at that time, we will discuss more detail about these namespaces. But at this moment, I want to tell you that over here, the system is a top level namespace. Below that, we have a data namespace. And under data namespace, we have three namespaces. One is SQL client, another is ODBC, another is OLEDB. And they are useful for connecting to the different types of databases. In this way, my code can be bit more organized. Now going one step ahead. Namespaces are not only for organizing code, but this code organization will help me to avoid something called as a name conflicts. Means we can have two types in the same project with the same name, but we can arrange them well by keeping them into the different namespaces. I'll give you one very basic, the beginner friendly example. You consider that I want to write one data structure like code. And this data structure code where I want to create linked list, I want to create tree. If you know bit of data structure, then we need the node for linked list and we need the node for tree also. If two different developers, they are working onto the list code and a tree code, technically it will work very well. There is no problem. But when there is a time that these two codes are to be combined into the same project, there will be error. That node class is getting duplicated. The question is how this particular problem can be handled, how this particular problem can be resolved. Well, that can be done using namespaces. Let me demonstrate you. So let me go ahead where we will continue to create a new project inside our old solution. So in this solution, again right click, add new project. Again, we will go for simple console application and maybe I'm giving a name called as the namespaces. I click on the next. Again, it is .NET 10 and not using any top level statement. Where you see that now by default, a new namespace is created. And this namespace is for our project namespaces. So for each project, by default, Visual Studio create one namespace and the name of the namespace is same as the project name. We can set this as startup project. Now I'm talking about I want to write a class node and this class node I want for implementing the list. So I want to have some classed list as well. As we can go ahead, we can always go to the main and we can think of creating the object of list. List is equal to new list and we can use the further functionalities of the list class. If another developer is developing, let's say tree, so he can develop his own tree separately and he may develop the class node separately. Again, by the time this developer is working in his environment, in his separate files, in his separate project, at that time, there's absolutely no problem. He can also go ahead and create the tree and use the functionalities of the tree. However, there will be real trouble when this code from the first developer and second developer is combined in the project. And then you can expect the error saying that this global namespace already contains a definition for node. Well, how do you handle it? As I said that we can have the separate namespace. And as you can see the syntax of the namespace creation over here, I will continue over here and I can simply say namespace and we can mention, let's say list namespace. You may give any name that you want and I will put the node of the tree in the separate namespace. Let's say it is tree space. Now you don't see any error in this case. If you want, we might consider having one top level namespace. Let's say namespace data structure. And in this namespace, we can have a separate namespace for the list and we can have the separate namespace for the tree. This is nothing but the better code organization. Well, now the question is how I can use this namespace into the main. Now you see that it is giving me the error. Earlier, the list was available globally and it was directly accessible. But now, since we put it into the namespace, now there are two ways that you can try to access it. Number one way is that why don't you give the fully qualified name of the class that you're looking for. So I'm giving the fully qualified name, let's say data structure dot list space dot list. This is fully qualified name of the class, and then that is given over here. And on the similar way, I can go for the tree as well. This is absolutely possible. That can also be done. However, every time writing such a big name can be the tedious job. So instead of that, I can think of using keyword. And using keyword will help me to import the namespace. So I can import the namespace by saying data structure dot tree space. Now, moment I use using statement to import the namespace, all the classes, all the types inside that namespace will be accessible. The only trouble is this kind of using statement must be written on the top. You cannot write it inside the function, or you cannot write it maybe within namespace or outside the namespace. This has to be given at the beginning of the file. So if I want to write it, it should be written on the top. In fact, that is the exactly same way we were using system in our earlier demos to access the console class. I hope you got the clarity what exactly the using statement does. Now, since you have used this namespace, you will be able to access all the classes inside that namespace directly. There is no need to write fully qualified name at every place. Well, now you understood how to create a namespace, and you also understood how to import that namespace. As you've seen, the namespaces can be written in different way. Let me highlight a few points. The first thing I want to highlight over here is usually namespace is mapped to a project, to an assembly. In Visual Studio, by default, one namespace is created for a new project, and name of that namespace is equal to the name of the project that you already seen. The programmer may create the additional namespaces in the same file. Just now, I shown you that we created two more namespaces, that two nested namespaces into the same file. Or you may split the namespace across multiple files, meaning by half of the namespace can be written at one place and half of the namespace can be written into the another file. How you can do that? Let me show you. What I can do is I can go to the another file of the same project. Let me just rename this particular file to, let's say, program1.cs. And then I want to create another one, add new item, and I'm calling it as a program2.cs. Now in this program2.cs, I'm saying that I want to write additional namespace. Let's say namespace data structure, the same namespace which was written over there. And inside this, earlier we have tree space and list space. We may also have additional graph space over here. And inside this, you may continue to write the graph class and many other things. You can continue with this. Now, this particular graph space can be used inside this particular file or inside the first file as well, or another file of the same project. Here, I try to show you how we can divide one namespace across multiple files. So the data structure namespace is split across multiple files. And if you want it, yes, you can continue using it over here. Let's say graph space dot graph, and you can mention, let's say graph is equal to new graph. And then you can continue using the additional functionality. Good. Then going ahead, we can also split the namespace into multiple projects or multiple assemblies. I hope you remember we had written one class library called the mathlib class library, correct? So inside mathlib class library, there was a mathlib namespace. And over there, we have done basic arithmetic. What if in future, I want to create a new class library which contains some trigonometric calculations? In that new trigonometric calculations done in a separate class library, in the separate project, that is a separate assembly, a separate DLL file, I can continue to use the same namespace mathlib. And then those trigonometry related classes will be the part of the same namespace. So the programmer have choice. The programmer may write multiple namespaces in the same file. Programmer may divide one namespace across multiple files in the project, or programmer may split that one namespace, multiple classes, across multiple projects or multiple assemblies. This is absolutely possible. In fact, there is also one concept called as a file scope namespace, meaning by every time you are writing a new namespace, you must have seen that for the namespace, you need to indent your class inside it. And if it is like a nested one, then we can have namespace, inside that another namespace, and then inside that you are writing the class. The level of indentation is increasing. What if I say that I want to create a new class? For example, I'm seeing that say program3.cs, and I do not want this kind of namespace over here. So do we have any shortcut option? Answer is yes, we have a shortcut option. We can declare a namespace on the top, which is referred as a file scoped namespace. This feature is available in the recent versions of C#. So here I can mention, let's say, a new namespace, just for sake of example. Now here you will see that this program3 class is technically part of this new namespace. It is not part of namespaces. It is part of the new namespace. That is good. And then inside this, you might write some additional functionalities. You might write some options that you wish. Now we have one file scope namespace written. Let me just write some sort of a test method over here. Let's say a test method. And inside this test method, let me print some message. Let's say console.writeLine. And inside this, I'm just putting a message. The program3.test method is called. The question is, how will you invoke this method into the program1 file or program2 file? Yes, answer is very simple. You can just import this namespace into those files and you can call it. Let me show you how we can do that. So let me take you to the program1.cs and we can say using new namespace. It is imported. Now program3, which was given over there, we can access in this case, and we can call the method that was nothing but the test method. We can run the application and you can cross check that yes, this is getting called very well without any problem. And what will happen if I want to call it into the program2.cs? I guess we need to again go and import into program2.cs. Can we have some shortcut? Answer is yes, we can have some shortcuts there. And what shortcut I can use is something called as a global using. The recent C# has provided this global using namespace, which has to be written on the top of the file. And once I say global using namespace, now this namespace need not to be imported into every file of the project. Once you have imported in one file, it is automatically imported for all the files. So what I'm saying is that you can go to the program 2. Inside program 2, if you are writing some sort of main, over here, without writing using explicitly, you can make a call to the program over here. And you can also call the method variable. There is absolutely no trouble on this. So importing it once, it will be available everywhere. Now, will my program work? Technically, no. Reason is, though we can do the import over here, in this particular case, we have written the two main in the same project. The program 1 also, we have written the main function, and program 2 also, we have written the main function. By default, your any project should have the single entry point. You should not be having multiple entry point. So if you try to build the application, check. There is one error indicating that the program has more than one entry point. And if you want to tell the compiler that out of this entry point, I want to consider only one particular main, you can use the command line option /main for our C# compiler csc.exe. But how you can do it in Visual Studio? Well, if you want to do it in Visual Studio, all I can do is I can go to the project properties, and inside project properties, I can mention a startup object. Now you see that there are two entry point, program 1 as well as program 2. Let me select the program 2 over here. And now earlier, whatever error I was getting, now same error will not be there. The build is successful. I can say Control F5 and you see that it is executing very well. Of course, this particular point that I taught right now is not related to namespace. It is about writing multiple main inside a single project, which is not a common scenario unless and otherwise you want to show some quick demos. Anyway, we are not going to write such kind of code again. This was just a quick demonstration for you. Now, I just talked about the certain concepts about the namespaces, where we understood that the namespace members can be accessed using namespace dot type name, that is referred as fully qualified name. The second thing we talked about is namespace can be imported using keyword. Good. And we can also perform the global import. The global import can be done by saying global using namespace name, so that it need not to be imported into the remaining files of the same project. And this global using has to be the topmost statement of your C# file. Then there is a concept called as a namespace aliases. Now, sometimes your namespace names are quite big. Now you can see that over here we have System.Data.SQL client. It is quite a big name. Or System.Collections.generic. It is quite big name. If we want to access such a big name, that fully qualified name, then it can be bit complex typing such a long name every time. So can we have some shortcut for that? Answer is yes. We can do this by giving namespace alias. Let's say using Jane is equal to system.collections.generic. Now this Jane is a alias, is a short name for system.collections.generic. Now we can access the members directly by saying Jane.list, and we can create maybe the list of integers like this, and then you can call its methods one by one if you want to add multiple members, or you want to display the list. So let's say that this is like a numbers list. I want to display. Yes, you can display like this also. Let me run this and you will see that, oh, the list object is created over here. We are not really trying to learn the list concept over here. Here, I want to tell you that instead of writing the full name System.collections.generics.list, such a big name. Now we can write a short name like gen.list, and that is possible due to something called as a namespace alias concept. Now you might have seen that in this particular code, I'm directly writing console.writeline. And even in this particular case, using system, something that I should have written, it is not even written, but still this code is going quite well. How this is possible? The earlier versions of the .NET was not supporting this, but the newer versions, this particular option is available because some most commonly used namespaces like system namespace or system.collections.generic namespace, these namespaces are automatically imported. And how this import is possible? This import is possible due to the project settings. You can check that. You can just double click on the project and you can go to the project properties. Into the project properties, do you see that they have written implicit using? The implicit usings means the most commonly used namespaces like system, system.collections, system.collections.generic, they are automatically imported, and being a programmer, you need not to write them again and again in every single file. That's wonderful. So this is another new feature of the C# that you can appreciate. Well, now that you have seen so many different things about namespaces, here is one more small concept. What if you do not write the namespace at all in the project? I guess that is also possible. Let's say I'm writing a new item and I'm calling it as program4.cs. Yes, by default it will create a namespace, but let me remove the namespace. And there is no namespace at all, not even a file scope namespace. Now the question is, this particular class is in which namespace? Let me tell you, in this particular case, this is everything is considered to be inside a default global namespace. So when any namespace is not mentioned in C# file, all members are considered to be part of a default global namespace. So you may write the public static void main over here. You may write certain class, let's say my class over here. You may write some additional classes or additional data types that you want to use over here. But I'm saying that this class or this class, they are part of the global namespace. They are outside Indian namespace is considered as a global namespace. And if you want to access them explicitly, that indicating that they are part of global namespace, you can explicitly use global : you can write it, let's say my class. Of course, now currently both are in the same namespace. I need not to write the global explicitly, but I just want to tell you, if you want to access the members of the global namespace, then you have to use the scope resolution operator global : and the namespace name. Here you learn another special concept about the C# namespaces. So what all things we discuss about namespaces? Here is a quick revision. The namespaces are logical container for the better code organization and avoiding the naming conflicts. If you want to write the multiple classes with the same name, you can put them in the different namespaces. By default, the namespace is associated with the project, and in Visual Studio, the name of the namespace is same as name of the project. But programmer can create the additional namespaces into the same C# file. He may split it across multiple files, or as I said, it can be split across multiple projects, that is multiple assemblies. To use a namespace, to use the data types inside namespace, either you can use fully qualified names of the classes, or you can import the namespace using keyword on the top. If you do not want to do that using in every file of the project, you may go for something called as a global using. There was also one concept that we talked about was a namespace alias, which is shortened name for any namespace. And we said that there are certain common namespace related to the system or collections or link queue. They are automatically imported in any C# project. The last thing I talked about was the global namespace. So when I'm creating a C# file and no namespace written over there, neither with the namespace curly bracket nor with the file scope namespace, at that time it is considered as part of default global namespace. The global is keyword, and you can explicitly access its member using global : I hope this was the brief understanding of the namespaces in C#. See you in the next session.